civic and organizational entities. He's also a friend and a fantastic moderator, and with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Goetsch.
I guess we're going to do this at some point, Nathan.
He jumped the gun.
No, you can't jump the gun on this topic. Okay. Let me have the, yes. Let me go ahead and have the panel come on up and get seated. Give you a little how we're going to do this today. All of you been here, you've seen me do this, you know I'm hyper organized and I'll be on the time clock. So the way we're going to do this is each individual on the panel will have 12 minutes to speak. They'll come here to speak. I'll go down there and I'll put the time clock on. At 11 minutes I'll stand up and they'll see me, and then at 11 and a half I'll start waving, and at quarter till I'll start throwing things at them. So while they're speaking, be thinking of the questions you want to ask them. That's going to be the best part of the day, is when you get to ask these folks, because we've got a powerful panel and you're going to want to ask these folks some questions. So entrepreneurship. Folks, what's an entrepreneur? It's somebody who sees a need, identifies a need, develops a product or service that will meet that need, and then does all the hard work of putting a business together to meet that need. And the big thing in being an entrepreneur, besides coming up with the idea and starting the business, is risk. You take a lot of risk to be an entrepreneur. And one of the things you're risking is either your money or somebody else's, usually both. And so capital is a huge part of it. So we have an example of an entrepreneur here who's going to tell the story of his company. And then we have a couple of people here who can talk about the capital side of it. So pay attention. Write your questions down, and I will come up and just call on you, and we have the microphone to take to you. Carolyn will help us with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Lewis and go right down. Lewis, you just come right on up here and tell your story. Then we'll go to Susan, and then we'll go to Blaire, and I'll be over here waving at you.
Okay. So, I'll wait get thrown things in. So, thank you, Dr. Goetsch. Thank you very much. So, well, in 1997, I was 29 years old and doing what most people do in their profession. You know, I got a little nervous there. I do a lot of public speaking and I don't get nervous, but for some reason I get the heart rate, so excuse me a second. But that's just kind of odd. But and something tragic happened. My sister passed away, and I inherited my sister's son. So I'm 29 years old with a 14-year-old. And I didn't actually finish the first point, which was that I was working 60 hours a week, doing what 29-year-olds do, getting good at my profession. I was a software engineer. And having a 14-year-old was a bit of a challenge for me. And I took a job with a company, and they treated me really well. They really helped me, gave me the time off that I needed, were very accommodating to my special circumstance. It was the 90s, and it was the dot-com boom, and I had a particular skill set in ATL comm that was in high demand, and so people were offering me money and cars and jet skis to come work for them. But the job I had, you know, gave me the freedom and flexibility I needed to raise Christopher, who's in the audience today. And so at the same time, people were pilfering software engineers back and forth. Everybody knows what happened. The dot-com boom was the bubble burst. A lot of these products and applications failed. Applications weren't being delivered on time. They were over budget. Nothing worked. And so it kind of came to me that the #1 reason people work is money, but it's not the only reason people work. So I decided to build a software engineering company that focused on engineers. We were going to invest in training. We were going to invest in people. We were going to have the best equipment. We were going to value people. We weren't going to be the battery companies that we had seen. You know, I call them battery companies. They plug you in, burn you out, and throw you away. And that was our innovation. So, you know, We talk about building a better mousetrap. You know, what is it to build a company? You have to fill a need. And that was a need. Software projects weren't getting completed. And part of the problem was that you couldn't get software engineers to stay long enough to actually build anything. So in that program, I was in Austin, Texas, like I said, and we just had an amazing year. Now, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that it was still a dot-com boom. I mean, there was a big need, and so I didn't have any trouble finding work. So in 2000, I had an amazing year, and I socked aside all the money I made. I mean, Christopher had turned 18, and I had drug him to graduation kicking and screaming. He was very happy to be rid of me when he turned 18, moved in with his grandmother. So I was alone and didn't have any real commitment. So I saved every dime I had. My partner and I had a partner, Vince Mayfield, and it was time to open an office, to get serious about this. And we had a conversation about it, and we said, you know, Austin's a great city, no doubt about it. It's a technology mecca. I said, but is that really what we want? You know, the Emerald Coast offers the quality of life for the kind of company that we want. The school system, the beaches, the laid-back atmosphere, the balance that we were looking for. So we moved back here in 2001 and opened an office in Shalimar, and that was the philosophy of our business, was to focus on the engineer. I still have my first 5 employees. We have very little turnover. Like, I think from the SBDC, we're talking about, you know, we talk about the mom and pops and the best kept secret and whatnot. BitWizards is, if you're looking for an Azure deployed Kintico website, and that technology may be foreign to you, but we are the best in the world. I mean, we have best in the world, best in class companies here in Fort Walton Beach. And we are one of them. I have one of 3 Kintico MVPs on staff, and he can make, you know, several $100,000 working somewhere else, but he chooses to work here. He's worked here for me for many years, and it's because of the environment that we provide. BitWizards has been nominated Florida Trend's Best Places to Work 5 years in a row. They pick 100 companies. I have no idea how they pick the companies. But then we've been in the top 10 for the past 5 years doing that. So there's many stories I could share. I'm sure the question and answer period would come up for that. I kind of want to discuss the innovation for that. I will say that in 14 years we've had to pivot, and but the core part of focusing on the engineer has been the focus of the company and the innovation, and it has been successful for us, treating people well. Many companies have spotted out. I can't say I developed that idea, but companies like Zappos and Delivering Happiness have definitely come up and done that, have made it mainstream now. Google with their every Friday, the guys can do whatever the heck they want. They just have to report on what they do. So I think it's commonplace now, but we were thinking that back in 2000. So this is a fantastic city, a great place to raise a family, and that's why we chose it. And I'm going to go ahead and give up my time to let the question and answer period time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis, and I'm sure there will be a lot of questions about how you did it and what you ran up against and all that kind of thing. Okay, so we'll have Susan come up next, and while Susan is coming up, let me call your attention to your program, because we don't introduce our panelists because we want to take away from their time. They got bios like 6 months long, but you need to read those. These folks, we are really blessed with quite a panel this morning, so read the pedigrees on these people. You got some good folks speaking to you this morning.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. So I'm here to talk about 2 different types of culture: the culture of entrepreneurship shift for a college campus, and then throughout a community. So I'm Dr. Susan Amat, and 6 years ago I was at the University of Miami harassing the president of our university around how to create a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship at on our campus. I had started my first business when I was 15, my first real business, that I paid taxes on, and dropped out of high school at the beginning of my junior year, traveled all over the world for the next 10 years before I sold my business, and then I went back to college. So when I went back to do my undergrad and then my MBA, I had a very different viewpoint of what was happening on the University of Miami campus and how we could really help kids change the way they viewed their own opportunities and how they could solve problems and turn them into not just great businesses, but scalable, high-growth businesses. So I had been teaching both in the College of Engineering and the College of Business, and again, literally harassing our president and provost about how we took entrepreneurship education out of a classroom and had it be something that kids did because they had to. Those kids who can't sleep because you're obsessed with an idea, not because it's something you're going to get a grade on and you do from August to December and then you move on to something else. So 6 years ago, I started the Launchpad at the University of Miami, which really changed the culture of entrepreneurship on campus. And I set it up in a way so that it could be replicated. I'm an entrepreneur. I wanted to do something that really solved a problem and made the entrepreneurship education experience easier for universities all over the world. So Blackstone and the Kauffman Foundation, we had lots of support, and it was replicated to 14 different schools. But my vision for this big international shift could not be realized when I was working for someone else. Hence, as an entrepreneur, I was lucky enough to have the Miami Downtown Development Authority ask me 2.5 years ago how I would start a technology ecosystem, a tech hub in downtown Miami. So with the Launchpad, the goals were really to take entrepreneurship out of a classroom, to have it be a co-curricular activity, and we had a platform and all the content so it could be replicated, and that was beautiful. But when you're creating a hub from scratch, when you're changing the way that the entire community views entrepreneurs, it's a very, very different ballgame. I didn't have, I had the mayor, which was lovely. I had the Miami Downtown Development Authority, both supporting us. But the vision for it was very different because we didn't yet, at the university level, you have the kids, you know the students, you know exactly what you need to do for them. And our goal was really around, at the university campus, changing the way they viewed themselves, giving them confidence and giving them access to amazing resources. And instead of telling them what to do, helping them down a path so that they had the skill set, right? It's teaching them how to fish instead of just giving them fish. At the community level, it was a totally different ballgame because there weren't a lot of high-growth technology businesses in Miami. There were a lot of people with great ideas, but to really focus on the kind of massive shift that I was looking for, we took a very different approach. So right now, I run an accelerator and an incubator in downtown Miami, but my company, Venture Hive, is an entrepreneurship education content company. Now, that's an important point. Again, we're an entrepreneurship education content and program company. What we've done is a new model of accelerators. So first and foremost, we are a multi-vertical accelerator. We recruit companies from all over the world in verticals where it makes sense for them to be in Miami. So travel, hospitality, healthcare, creative industries, art, music, film, design, fashion, and trade logistics. So first and foremost, when we do our call every 6 months for our new class, we're looking for companies in verticals where we have we have world-class experts. We have companies that will give them pilots within our jurisdiction, right? Second, we don't take equity in the companies. Now, why is that important? When I was running the Launchpad, I realized so much of the challenge of supporting entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are incredibly paranoid people. I am one. I understand how it is. That's your baby, and you definitely want people to help you make it better, but you're not always really excited about people telling you how you can make it better. So part of the challenge was in guiding students through, not just, I would have a student come into me and after a couple minutes know exactly what they should be doing and all these steps. But guess what? I'm not always the target market, right? The market decides if your idea is good or bad, not some professor. No offense. I was a professor too, so. It's all about the market. It's all about a customer saying, yes, I'm going to pay you Because I have that problem too, and I like the way you're solving it, and I trust that you're going to solve my problem for me. So instead of us, when that student would come in, instead of us saying, that's a great idea, or that's a terrible idea, we're not giving the kids validation. The market, your customers have to tell you. And I'm sure all of you have been given great advice at some point in your life that you weren't ready to hear. And you didn't understand it was good advice until you screwed up yourself and had the epic fail. And until you have that epic failure yourself, you may listen to the person, but until you've lived through that failure, you don't really know who you are, and you don't know how big of a risk taker you are, and you don't know what you're willing to do to make something happen. So I take that philosophy into Venture Hive. And what I mean by that is, in 18 months, we've been open 18 months, we're responsible for 23 relocations of entrepreneurs from all over the world. We literally have startups from 18 different countries who have moved to South Florida to be part of our program. And these aren't just like the leftover entrepreneurs from some program. These are the top startups from Buenos Aires and Romania and India. I mean, people who have already gone through some of the top accelerators in the world, but then they come to our program because we're the next level. We don't focus on the business development. A lot of places make sure you have an awesome business plan and a great pitch, but if the entrepreneur can't execute on their vision, doesn't matter how great the pitch is and how great the business plan is. So we focus on individual development of world-class entrepreneurs. And when we recruit them, as I said, we recruit the companies in industry verticals, but then we, as the next level, look at the entrepreneurs themselves. Are those people going to be comfortable in South Florida? You know, it's kind of Latin American North, right? And are they going to be comfortable having their families raised there? Are these people who are going to come here for a 3-month program, or are they going to stay? Are they going to be able to build world-class businesses in South Florida? And at the core of it all, are they jerks? We have a very strict no-jerk policy. I want nice people in my program. I want to wake up and be excited to run into any of them, and whatever the problem is, I want to be their partner in crime for solving it. So what we've done is set up, we have a 12-week intensive program. They cry almost every day. It's pretty bad. So it's 12 weeks of 2 to 5 hours a day it's a structured mentorship-driven program with a very deep curriculum. Then they get additionally a year of free space in our program, so their chances of staying are much more likely because they're ingrained to think that they're going to be there for a year. They get a $25,000 non-equity grant. So I have some of the top investors and accelerators all over the world sending companies to us, which has been awesome. And in a very short period of time, within 5 months of us starting, we became the entrepreneurship education partner for the U.S. State Department. And just this May, we were asked by Microsoft to host the first Microsoft Innovation Center in the U.S. in Miami, because our approach is very different. Because we don't take equity, and because we focus on world-class support for high-growth technology entrepreneurs in a way that nobody in the world is doing, we've been able to really position ourselves to be that haven for entrepreneurs. We have people in our building we have 2 guys who sold their last business for $300 million. So you would think, oh, they should be mentors then. Guess what? Everybody needs good support. So yes, they come in and mentor some of our other companies, but every other week they're meeting with my team and we're helping them be better CEOs and CTOs. So it's a very different type of approach. I call it the Montessori model of accelerators. We have some older kids who've done lots of cool stuff, but it's all about that culture and community. I don't take companies that would directly compete against each other because I want them to all be very open and free with what they're sharing. And so in the same way I did with the Launchpad, we created a proprietary platform so that we follow every metric to the point where it's really annoying to everybody to be giving us all their metrics. But that's how I know that what we do works. And that's how we better help the next group. So another cool thing about what we've been able to do, as I said, they're coming from 18 different countries, but we've had applicants from 32 different countries. And literally, we're a year and a half old. But right now, I'm in the middle of doing an 8-week virtual mentoring program for the top 40 tech startups in Africa. We've also done work all over Latin America and the Caribbean and Europe and Asia. And as we pull all these things together, you realize you hear the same ideas over and over and over again, right? But it's that individual that has to execute that is what it all stems from, whether it's going to be a success or failure. Either that person has the strength and power to not just do the work and not sleep and make sacrifices every day, but also lead a team to be able to follow that vision when it gets harder and harder and harder. And for every huge win, there are so many challenges that erupt. And the type of person who has to literally make 300 to 1,000 little decisions every day, those micro decisions end up being why a company becomes a huge success or doesn't work after a short period of time. So the culture that we've created at Venture Hive, and I should also explain, we have this accelerator incubator where we create all that content and validate it and test it. And then we've started Venture Hive U, which is my dream realized at the university level. It's emerging market content, and it's an international network. So we're about to open our first U.S. Venture Hive U this week in Virginia, which we're really excited about. And we're opening in 5 schools in Tanzania this year. And now we've also partnered with Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So can you imagine being a 15-year-old and starting in a month, every single day you're coming into Venture Hive to do 2 hours of technical and business education? We're going to completely screw them up. They will be unemployable very soon. Because when they're exposed to that and they're given the power to say, here's a problem I see, and I'm going to solve it myself, and I'm going to create the technology, and I'm around all these incredible people from all over the world who are going to be mentoring me, and all of a sudden I'm their colleague, it will change the way they view the world. So I was very, very honored to be invited to speak here today. I have very close friends in Fort Walton Beach, and it's been really important for me to share this story with people, because in Miami, yes, we're a big city, but a lot of what we had to do was a start from scratch thing. It's about finding coachable people who don't care about being the face of entrepreneurship. They care about building a good business. And they're not going to be going to networking events because they're too busy not sleeping with their team working all night. It's a very different type of person that's going to build a high-growth business like this, a high-growth technology business. And finding mentors and pulling together all the pieces we needed to create world-class companies, it's been a struggle every day. But we've been able to do it with a lot of success because our goal was always about building incredible international entrepreneurs who saw Miami as a place where it made sense for them, and then convincing the rest of the business community that they could either help us create incredible jobs, or they could keep working as service providers and not necessarily creating the high-growth, high-tech jobs of the future. And in 18 months, the recent REMI study showed us having a $7.3 million economic impact just in Miami-Dade County. And we've created more than 70 high-tech jobs from zero. Literally, the building we're in had 14 homeless people sleeping outside of it the week that we moved in to start painting. So a parking lot that was full of homeless to now there's 100 cars parked there every day creating high-growth businesses. So I wish the same for you guys, and I'm very, very happy to be here to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. That was outstanding. Blaire, would you like to come up and share yours? All right, be thinking of your questions now. Jot them down.
Well, good morning, everyone. And I'll have the third entrepreneurship story today. And the group that we work with is called the Florida Angel Nexus. And we founded FAN really out of need. So in 2012, in Central Florida, a lot of companies were really seeking that capital. So you have a high-growth business, you need resources, you need to hire people, but you need that capital, that catalyst to help you take it to the next level. And a lot of times it's not just the capital. It's really getting that mentor who has networking connections, and like Susan said, just really being able to surround yourself with the culture of excellence and people to support your vision and what you're looking for. And the great thing about Florida, and I'm new to the Emerald Coast, but what I would expect here as well, is that there is incredible intellectual and financial capital in the state. There's actually only a few states that have more accredited investors than the state of Florida. And the definition of an accredited investor is that an individual that has more than $1 million of net worth, excluding their primary residence, or they make more than $200,000 a year the last 2 years, or $300,000 if you are married. And so these accredited investor individuals are, everywhere in Florida. And one of the things about this beautiful weather and this great view is it can be hard to understand all of the additional things that you could be doing in your community other than sailing and boating. And sometimes the entrepreneurial community, I think, can be harder to tap into in a lot of places. So what we've done in Orlando is build an angel network. It has 45 individuals, and we committed $1 million in capital last year. But FAN invested a lot of resources into building that initial angel network. So building a platform to collect the information from the entrepreneurs in a way that's very coachable, so that you can have a first-time entrepreneur walk through the process and really learn a lot about how to speak with an investor and the questions they're going to ask, and how to prepare themselves for success, and in a way that's scalable, so we can give access to students and give access to everyone to go through this coaching. And also just coordinating individuals and getting them all together. Cultivating the pipeline, doing pre-screening, due diligence, post-investment monitoring, and support. We had to figure out how to do all of these things, and thankfully we had a great team of people. The team is really what's so important. And so once we invested so much into the infrastructure and assets of building just this one angel network in Orlando, we thought, wouldn't it be great if we made these resources available to all of the communities across Florida who also have pools of accredited investors, people who have that critical knowledge and critical capital that can be infused in a company that can change their inflection point from a steady growth rate to really hockey sticking, which is what you hear investors talking about. They want to see those financials eventually kind of take a exponential growth leap. And so giving them the entrepreneurs the resources they need when they need it, and also linking and leveraging all the assets that are in the state of Florida. I know in Orlando there are a ton of assets to help entrepreneurs, but it can be hard to navigate those assets. And when you're head down and focused on your company, networking, things like that, it can be more of a distraction than a help at some points. And so how do you connect to one place that has kind of a landscape of all of the resources available and be able to connect you with those people, subject matter experts, and the financial capital you need when you need it? And so these angel investors, they really have the potential to change the entrepreneurial climate. And within Florida, if we can get this entrepreneurial community with a large group of accredited investors engaged, we can find the right subject matter expert to assist these growing companies. So once they get to the point where they have some proof of concept, so what we call that is the market has displayed that they're interested in what you're doing. They're willing to pay you for what you're doing, or they've at least validated the assumptions. Then you can start speaking with angel investors that may be interested in getting involved kind of as a partner. The earlier stage the capital comes in, typically the more of an understanding they have in your market and your niche. And so with the Florida Angel Nexus, we're going to communities across the state, working with economic development groups, universities, service providers, to understand who the groups of accredited investors are, and what types of things are important to them when it comes to the community, what types of companies they're interested in. I've heard that there's some defense contracting around here, and there might be some interest in those type of companies. And being able to identify companies from across Florida who may be a good fit for their investment needs. And some people may not be familiar with angel capital, but it actually, in 2013, over $29 billion in the United States were invested in angel capital. So this is done across the country quite frequently. And Florida has about 421 million of that 29 billion. And I would like to see, and many people across the state, that number drastically increased. So I believe, and this is my venture, that by providing these critical tools for communities to be able to pool their accredited investors together, and also so that we can connect their pipeline of high growth businesses to these resources that are more statewide, that we can make a drastic impact on the entrepreneurs and the economy. So that's the main point that I have. So I look forward to answering all of your questions, and thank you all so much.
Okay, we'll move to the question and answer part of this right now. Let me I was jotting some notes as Lewis and Susan and Blaire spoke, and some key points they made. And it's interesting how when you get experts in a field like this, how you hear some themes that are just repeated and repeated. I was once speaking at a conference up at Harvard, and it was on various business topics, and the fellow in front of me was an entrepreneur. He'd never gone to college. Very, very, very successful person. And he was speaking to a group of people from Harvard who were taking MBAs with an entrepreneurial emphasis. And he had them circled and sit in a circle like that, and he simply went around and asked, what are you going to do? What kind of business are you going to start? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? He went around. And every one of them said, I'm going to try this. The next one said, I'm going to try that. Finally, he got to the last one in the room, and that person said, I'm going to do this. And that guy said, the rest of you are going to fail. You need to go into something else. This is the only one who will be an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur. And I thought, boy, what a cold guy. But you heard that theme. Think about it. You heard Lewis talk about there were things he could have done differently and could have done better. But he's running a very successful company, so what he learned is, I'm going to trip, and every time I trip, I have to get up and keep going. Get up and keep going. Learn from what tripped me up and get up and keep going. You heard Susan talk about, you don't get your validation for your idea from mom, you get it from your customers in the market. They're going to decide if you succeed or not, and you have to persevere and execute. She talked about persevere and execute. And then you heard Blaire say similar thing. The market validates your idea, and the best idea is going nowhere without some capital behind it. So good points that they have made this morning. All right, now let's have let's have Caroline. We'll bring you the microphone, and let me see if anybody has questions, and if I need to prime the pump, I've got some to get us started. Does anybody have a question that they'd like to start? Right all the way over here. And panel, just if you're interested in the question, you answer it, and if not, and you have to hold
Yeah, this will be for Lewis. You mentioned several, my question's going to be about growth, but you mentioned several prerequisites for growth. One is, I think you mentioned that you had a certain competitive advantage in the marketplace, and you realized that to sustain that growth, to sustain your business, that competitive advantage had to come from your core competencies, which were, in your case, in your employees, right? You also mentioned another thing that's really important for growth, and it kind of refers to retained earnings. You continue to save your money and invest in your business, okay? And so all that set a foundation for growth, and as you build a world-class company, you had a lot of opportunities, I'm sure. But we see just the opposite sometimes in business, where what they focus on is they just focus on sales and revenue, and particularly in the early stages, they try to just drive that revenue as fast as possible because they want to grow. And when they have some success, instead of investing in their business, they go out and buy the jet ski. So both, I think I'd like it, both early stage and now, what has been your perspective on growth? How did you control growth through the years so that you would reach the level that you're at today? And what's your perspective on growth going forward?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that's why a lot of businesses fail. Anybody who hasn't run a business and decides to get into a business, the first thing I'd say is it's a long game. It is not a short game. If you want to get rich quick, buy some lottery tickets. I mean, sure, you hear about them in the news. You know, you develop Angry Birds and you get rich. That's the lottery. It can happen, sure, but that's not a good strategy. And so I reinvested, and in 2002, I made $12,000. I was a six-figure guy before I did this. For 4 years, I made 36 grand. And I reinvested everything back into my business. Now, of course, I was fortunate. I didn't have a family or other commitments, and so maybe that's why I was able to do that. And so I reinvested quite a bit. I was in it for the long game, and that's a personal story. I'm a member of Vistage. I also mentioned, being willing to adapt, and I think that's one of the things you need to do is adapt at different stages of your game. When you're first in it, revenue should be. I mean, you got to get the money, you got to get sales, just to get operating capital to keep going. If you're not spending somebody else's money, if you don't have a lot of capital, you've got to get sales. So that is a good starting point. But as soon as you get it, yeah, if you're just cashing everything out, well, you're going to go down pretty quick. But having been in the business a while, I ended up in Vistage, and that's one of the bit of advice that I gave somebody. He was giving himself, he had 2 employees, and he was trying to draw a 6-figure salary. I'm like, well, you're not going to last very long if you do that. I was in it for the long game.
Good question, good answer. Go ahead.
Yes, Joe Shearer. I work with folks that are just starting out, and this question is for Blaire. Blaire, you described a process essentially that was somewhat of a flow down from accredited investors that are out there searching for viable companies. What about the other way up? What would be your comments or suggestions for someone just starting out to make the connection with the network that you described?
Sure. So we have an online portal. So if you go to FloridaAngelNexus.com, there is a form for entrepreneurs to fill out, and we will send back a username and password that gets you access to log into the online application. And so that's open to anyone. And if you just make sure they put student in the referral code, and we'll give them a whole tutorial of resources that they can use to go through the process. And what's great about it is it does help them understand all of the questions that an investor is going to ask before they want to write the check. And so they can really prepare concise answers to help them navigate that Q&A session, which is really important. So, understanding your market is very key. So research with investors, they want to understand an exit strategy. That's one big differentiation between a company that you start with a bank loan maybe, or one that you are in for, you're shooting for a 5 to 7 year exit. You're building a company as large as possible that has some type of strategic acquisition or IPO potential. So a lot of times these businesses have a growth strategy, and the capital required to execute on that strategy is more than they can personally put in themselves, or friends and family is usually the next round. Credit cards, you got to get yourself through that validation standpoint. And so testing all of those critical assumptions, investors with assumptions mean risk, and you touched on that at the beginning. And with investors, risk reduces your valuation, which makes capital more expensive. So the more you can validate all of your assumptions on your growth strategy, the better. So for students, I would say talk to people in the market and understand where they can position themselves to really solve a unique need and have a sustainable way to build a business around that. But yeah, the online application portal, and then we have great people, part of our pre-screening committee, that can help them understand if this is a right fit for angel capital in general or FAN, and make some strategic recommendations there as well.
Good, thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, this for a question for Lewis. Seeing that sign there leaning against the podium, how much of a factor was the ad valorem tax abatement in your decision to expand here in Fort Walton Beach in Okaloosa County rather than moving to a different area?
It looks like there's an inside joke there somewhere, but so the culture-based organization, we wanted to keep our team together, but we were having difficulty attracting talent here. And as we were expanding, finding Class A office space was a problem. And so we had decided, not completely, but we were looking into opening a second office back in Austin, Texas, where our roots were from. We have an office there. It's just a Regis office. We have a salesperson there, but I was actually considering going back myself and actually developing an engineering team. In combination with the EDC, actually Caroline approached us in discussions with the ad valorem tax. We were able to get the neighbors building completely refurbished and fitted for us. And so the ad valorem tax was huge. It gave incentives in order for them to be able to completely refurbish the building, to get us into it and outfitted. So all of those jobs are now being created here, and we didn't split our team. So yeah, absolutely, it was huge.
Thank you, Lewis. Nathan and I and several others working on this just breathed a huge sigh of relief. We should have planted that answer. That was... Okay, let me ask, I have 3 questions. I'll get you next. I have 3 questions that have been submitted from folks specifically for specific panelists. So let me ask one for Susan, okay? And Susan, if you could comment on what are the biggest challenges to a community becoming like a high-growth community? What are the biggest challenges?
I would say the first challenge actually stems from people wanting to invest in businesses and getting really, really excited, but the company's not being ready for investment. We've actually had that challenge for a little while in Miami, where a lot of people have become angel investors and there isn't the right level of support for the companies that they're investing in. So the way that the angels are looking at the companies and the whole process of conflict of interest isn't being managed properly. So we're starting to see some challenges. I mean, I'm like the mother bee, obviously, in Venture Hive, where we're not having people come in and talk to our companies until we've already validated that they're not investing in a competitor, et cetera, because we want to make sure that that conflict of interest is controlled for at all times. We focus on that entrepreneur and protecting them. Another big challenge is just in making sure that the type of people who are doing mentoring, again, are avoiding conflict of interest and that they actually are listening more than they're talking. Because a really good coaching program, a really good development of an entrepreneur is not about following in somebody else's footsteps for what they may have done, but challenging that entrepreneur to find his or her own path and making sure that they're connecting to the right resources, which may not be in the local community. And it's okay to say, I don't know, and we don't have that resource here. We need to find it, and it may be in New York or California or Atlanta or somewhere else. But really kind of having the humility to say, I don't know, let's find the best person in the world for you so you can create a world-class business. It's a very different mindset, but it's something that's challenging for some communities to kind of embrace. They want to find all the answers locally, and sometimes it's just not there.
You know, that's so critical for us because there are going to be things that are not here for entrepreneurs. We're a small community, and so great answer. We all needed to hear that. Our job is to reach out and find it, not to necessarily, we don't have to provide it. We can just connect them with it. So very encouraging to hear that. Thank you, Susan. Okay, got a question here.
Yes, sir. Susan, I think, how important is an accessible incubator in your locality?
Can you define accessible?
One that's virtually free. to the entrepreneurs?
So I think that's very important. But the problem is that there are. I've literally been to accelerators and incubators in 30 different countries. They're all over the place. Most of them are really, really poor. So an incubator is not a place where people show up with their laptops and do work. That's a co-working space. An incubator has to have very high quality support and mentorship. And even ones in our, there are many, many dozens throughout our state that are extremely poor. They may be good for technology transfer type companies, but for high tech, high growth companies, it's a much harder challenge to make sure that they have the programming, because a lot of times they do focus on local resources who may not have sold their last business for dozens of millions of dollars. Even in terms of the kind of investors you bring in, we've actually had quite a few companies in our program who got local investment that seemed good value investment, and then when they went to go to their A and B rounds, so $1 million, $5 million type rounds, the New York and California investors wanted to get rid of the local investors ASAP because they didn't have the value added, let's say. They didn't have the cachet that's going to help that business grow. They actually caused more problems than provided solutions, because it's not just about the money. It's about that value added. It's about having that endorsement from somebody from that industry who knows the space and that validation. We focus on customer validation instead of investor validation. If you have revenue, that means you're doing something right. And we've seen a lot of companies get a little bit of funding and then not necessarily focus on the high growth revenue that they need because they have a cushion. I like people being lean and starving and being hungry, because then they're going to do whatever it takes to make that business work. Ethically, of course. So your incubator question itself is really important, because it's not about a space. It's about having really high level support so that the companies have a different expectation for themselves, and they understand the difference between being the top company in the region or in the incubator versus being a top international company, because they're very different things. So, but in our program, we charge $250 a month for our incubator companies, and they come from all over the world to pay $250 a month to work in our space. There's a psychological thing of them paying something, but we're spending $500 to $1,000 a month just on support services for each company. But that's what we want to do. We want to have awesome businesses and learn from them so that we can document and create the content. So it's very, very, very important to have a fantastic world-class incubator experience.
Thank you. Good question. Ron, get right to you. Susan made just a knock it out of the ballpark point there that I want to make sure we get. If you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, you've got to be a PhD. And I don't mean a PhD like Susan. What I mean by PhD is you have to be poor, hungry, and driven. Because that's what's going to make you stick it out and stay with it. And if you'll talk with folks that start, going from six-figure to 12,000, 30, that's putting up with a lot. So poor, hungry, and driven. Remember that. Okay, Ron, you had a question.
Thank you. First off, thank you all for being here. And there were 3 terrific stories, but I have to admit, Dr. Amat, you had my head spinning. That's an awful lot to have happen in 18 months. And I guess I'd like to ask you if you could just, I know it's maybe a tough question to answer in a short period of time, but can you give us any kind of background on how you're attracting these mentors, how or if they're compensated, how are you compensated? You just threw out $500,000 figure. Where's all this coming from? Thank you.
So we started the program with $230,000 of program support from the Miami Downtown Development Authority. So that covers our operating costs for a 12-week intensive program. But my vision was to have them there for the full year, so we eat the rest of the cost for that. Mayor Jimenez, the mayor of Miami-Dade County, committed $1 million over 4 years so we could do $25,000 non-equity grants. We're a for-profit company, so my husband, who is a world-class CTO, he was based in Silicon Valley for 15 years and left his very nicely paying position to be our full-time CTO in November. So the two of us do not take salaries. We put everything into this business, and our revenue comes from We work with corporations doing innovation programs for them, recruiting world-class accelerator programs to support specific industry verticals they do, as well as develop these programs at universities and for the State Department and other groups like that. So your question was exactly, where's the money coming from? It comes from people who want world-class support with no conflict of interest. And I think that that's really kind of the important piece that most people don't understand until it bites you really hard. We've actually, just last night, I was hosting a pretty big angel group in Miami, and I like ran in to welcome everybody before I ran to the airport. There were 50 men in the room, no women. They've made a lot of investments. They're all, worth 10 to 50 plus $1 million, a pretty successful group of people. And I found out that 25% of them had invested in a crowdfunding finance company for internationals, and we have a crowdfunding finance company for internationals in our building. And my company, one of our startups, was asked to present to them, and the group didn't even have a concept that there was no way that guy who's already, he was an early investor in a company called Open English, so he knows how to, he has some money and he's been able to self-finance. He's put in several $1 million of his own money to get to where he is right now. And there's no way he's gonna put up his idea on a board with a screening group who he has no idea if they've invested in a competitor or not. Even though the businesses are different enough that they're not direct competitors, it's been a continual challenge to just make sure that the education piece is there on the importance of conflict of interest. And we work with governments all over the world. So to have them understand that even if somebody are the very well-known entrepreneurs from the region, just because you're a successful entrepreneur doesn't mean you can teach entrepreneurship and train somebody else to be a good entrepreneur. But secondly, and more importantly, that controlling for conflict of interest means that you really have a very clear sense that everybody is doing the right thing for economic development and not for personal gain. And keeping it clean and making sure entrepreneurs have the best experience in your program, in your community, with other people in the community as possible, that's why they're going to stay, because they're not going to find that in other places.
Good. Other questions? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Chris Erickson. I work with BitWizards. Just kind of go off with what Ron was talking about in terms of marketing. For Susan, since you are such a young company, only 18 months old, what was the key to the economic growth and your business growth in terms of marketing? How did you get your name out internationally so quick and so effectively?
Well, I already had my name out because the Launchpad program was named the top entrepreneurship education program in Harvard Business Review twice within like 6 months. So I was already going all over the world as an expert in university level education. There's even a Blackstone Launchpad at UCF. So there's one in the state at UCF, there's one in Miami, but then they're all over the rest of the US as Blackstone Launchpads. So I already was known, and then I was asked to do a lot of stuff for the World Bank and the State Department, so it's really about continuing to pay your dues no matter what. I ran Startup Florida for Startup America, and being somebody, it's that hungry piece that's really, really important. I had a very, very nice job. My husband had a very, very nice job. When you leave that and decide to have a business, you pay your dues every single day. And so I go and leave my family to go to, I'm going to Nigeria in a few weeks. I go to all these crazy places because those are opportunities to help promote what we're doing and how important it is to have that difference of what we do versus what other people are saying that they're doing. So it's really about paying your dues every single day and being humble in every opportunity that you have, because you never know, somebody that you met 4 years ago may be in a totally different place. And I'm just always shocked. We were just talking about this yesterday. People burn bridges really fast and they don't realize that somebody who's a nice assistant to somebody one day could be something else after a few years, after they get their MBA, etc. So it's really about just keeping really nice connections and taking chances and being a good person. And it's all kind of stuff that's obvious, but unfortunately people don't necessarily all think in that way. Say.
Okay. I have a question. Jim, I'll get you next. Carolyn, Jim wants to speak, but let me ask this question that was submitted for Blaire. I'm trying to kind of keep the questions balanced as to who they go to. So Blaire, all the bankers out there, if we go in and ask for money from them, they've got their little checklist that we have to kind of respond to. What about with venture capital? What's a good, what do you look for? What do you seek as a venture capitalist?
So as we've all touched on, it has a lot to do with execution. And so at the end of the day, investors are looking for the jockey. They want to understand that as things change in the market, as disruptions happen, that entrepreneur understands how to pivot and continually position that company for success. But also just having a pressing market need or some addressable concern that the company can position themselves to satisfy, and a high growth strategy that they feel has some validation. So being able to show that the market is willing to pay for what they're doing. So that reduces the risk. But the investors typically want to understand that there's some type of plausible expectation that for the $1 they put in now, $10 could come out in 5 to 10 years. So some type of exit strategy, that the company will have a value that will be something that someone wants to purchase down the road, or that they could IPO successfully.
Good, thank you. Jim, did you have a question?
I guess for Blaire, if a community wants to step forward and begin to support an angel network, short of looking around the room and tagging the 5 people I know that have some money in here, what's the best way for a community, for an economic development council to identify those angels?
Definitely. So what we've been doing in Orlando is testing our model and getting some proof of concept. So part of it is pulling together some great community leaders. And so we started with 15 people who had high integrity in the community, people who had been doing angel investing for some time and mentoring. So they already had that reputation that companies really wanted to work with them. And then building on that through referral mostly, so working with the friends of friends. But part of it is also angel education. So we're putting on an event in Orlando on October 9th. I know it's a bit of a drive for you all, but we plan on duplicating this model across the state. But we're bringing the Angel Resource Institute to Florida to do some educational content to help people who are more used to doing real estate or other types of investing get into investing in high growth businesses. And then we work with service providers like accountants, lawyers, wealth managers, IRAs. They help us identify other high net worth individuals who may be interested in attending an event like that. And then we host pitch days and help matchmake. A big part of it, though, is the database. So as we start meeting all of these investors, we understand what their background is and what the types of investments that they're interested in, so that when we have a company, we can go through and see who would be interested in that type of deal, who would have the networking connections inside of Florida, outside of Florida, across the world to help this company validate their assumptions and take their company to the next level. So it is kind of a three-pronged approach, and I'd say the third one is working with press partners just to let the community know that there are high-growth companies in the area, that there are accredited investors, and that these type of things are happening in Florida. And to help elevate the tech community in Orlando, we're starting to have a couple accelerators open up. There's getting to be more of a critical mass in the downtown market. And it's taken the press a little while to care, honestly. And so we've been really lobbying to help cover more tech news, just so people know that this is happening and it's exciting and it's in your hometown. And what we see a lot of is our investors, or our potential investors, are doing venture investing, but they invest outside the state. So they invest in funds in the Northeast or in California. And so that capital is leaving the state and isn't impacting our community. And so I just know from what I've seen in Orlando and we work with companies across the state, so from Miami, we actually haven't invested in one from North Florida, but we'd love to. And so part of it definitely is just matchmaking and leveraging all of these great accredited investors that are in the state of Florida to connect with the next generation of entrepreneurs.
Okay, thank you. We have time for, Carolyn, one more question from the audience, and you have...
Mine is for Susan.
Okay.
And it is how you went about as a group when you first started identifying the verticals that matched the assets of your community. Did you get a group together and select and review and refine that list? Do you change it periodically, or how do you go about that very fundamental basic step where you say, these are the companies and the types of people we want to attract to our program?
I think a core piece of what we did was it was a public-private partnership from the beginning. And so I was actually on the steering committee for One Community, One Goal, which was the economic development strategic plan for 20 years for Miami-Dade County. And we had 6 targeted industry verticals within that our county was focused on. And so we decided within those that 3 of them at the time lent themselves best to high-tech, high-growth disruption. So the first class we recruited on was travel, hospitality, healthcare, and creative industries. And then I added trade logistics because of a partnership we're about to announce with a Latin American country that has a world-class trade logistics piece. And so our port has just been redeveloped, and we have a lot of very exciting things with importing and exporting happening within South Florida. And plus with this partnership, I thought it made a lot of sense to add that in so that we can develop very deep knowledge within developing high-growth entrepreneurs within that realm. And so it was all based on economic development goals of the county. We try to align everything we do with county economic development goals.
Okay, I was supposed to ask the last questions, but Jim, one of those people in the room, one of the 5 that has money, has asked to ask a question, so I'm not going to say who it is, but Steve, you get the last question.
You must be mistaken. Talked a lot about entrepreneurship with exit strategies and IPOs, those kind of things. What about entrepreneurship? Mature company that is there a match, or is the culture too different in a mature company to really be innovative in doing entrepreneurship?
So that's an excellent question. Part of the challenge with entrepreneurship is who owns what. So we've been working with several corporations throughout the state, actually, and a couple outside the state, who want to have big technology disruption within their industry, but they don't necessarily have the right people in place to do it. So there's different solutions. Number one solution is you try to bring in disruptive type people who are great entrepreneurs. The challenge being that depending on how much bureaucracy you already have in your company, it's very hard to have other people want to run at the same pace. Entrepreneurs work at a different pace and they don't sleep, and it's a different mindset. What we've been doing with a lot of success is partnering with with one corporation in particular, which we'll be announcing soon. We're doing an accelerator in their vertical, right? We're recruiting all the companies. We manage all aspects of the recruiting and developing of the tech companies. They're having their executives be the mentors. And so we have a nice kind of arm's length piece between the rest of the technology piece of their company, because if somebody from their IT staff, their CTO, their CIO, whatever, starts a mentor, understanding whose idea is what, the goal is we're helping them develop world-class companies who are bringing solutions to them. It's not about adopting their technology within the company and then not having the startup exist anymore. So it needs to be managed very, very carefully, and there needs to be very clear guidelines and a process of who owns what, conflict of interest, and making sure that everything is documented really, really well from the beginning, because it gets very blurry when there are mentoring sessions and brainstorming sessions and how those things sometimes evolve. With another corporation we're working with in South Florida, we're actually kind of serving as their external technology transfer arm, because a lot of their staff come up with great ideas, and it's not about the idea, it's about actually building something. So we're working with them, and then if they get to a certain point where they have something that makes sense and is validated to some extent, then the corporation is deciding whether or not they want to invest in the idea and give that staff member a leave of absence to work on it with the corporation owning a piece of it. So there's a lot of different models that can be done, but it always comes back to real documentation, because otherwise you just have your employees leave with their great idea and sometimes with intellectual capital from the company, and then you try to buy the company back in a few years because it's an awesome business, right?
Would anybody else on the panel like to comment on internal entrepreneurship? Okay. We have, folks, you've had a good graduate seminar on entrepreneurship this morning. Excellent panel. Let's give them a hand. We are right on time. It's time to turn it back over to Nathan, and he'll take it from here. Thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you, Dave. Before I close us out, Kelly Massey indicated he'd like to make a quick announcement. So, Kelly?
Absolutely. Just real quick, I just wanted to,